Hello and welcome back to the Pirates Rugby podcast. My name is Hugh and we have a packed show for you today, covering the thrilling game at Ellis Park, the action in Argentina, as well as getting to know our wonderful guest a little bit better too. But before I introduce her, don't forget to like the podcast and subscribe if you haven't already. Share a link with a mate and leave us your thoughts down below, either via the YouTube comments or by leaving a 5-star review on audio platforms. But enough plugging, let's introduce the guest. Some of you may know her from her fantastic TikTok account, where she shares her rugby insights as well as taking rugby Instagram to task in the recent weeks. She was actually requested by a listener a while back, but we finally got her. Ella Ferguson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. That was such an illustrious introduction. I feel honoured.
We only have the best on this podcast. We only have the best. So that's why you're here.
Of course, I could tell.
So it's been an intense 24 hours for rugby fans. So you've been up since your time, 3 a.m.?
Yeah, around 3 a.m, 2:45, to get up, get prepared, come to terms with the fact of watching the very first Springbok All Black test of 2024.
So you're a get up at 3 a.m. rather than a stay up to 3 a.m.
Yeah, I did consider the stay up, but it just wasn't going to happen, unfortunately. No, I'm too old for that sort of carry on these days.
I considered watching Australia, Argentina, and then USA, Canada was kicking off an hour after that finished, and I was like, should I? But then it very quickly became appear, no, I'm going to bed. So I think just back in the day, maybe I would have stayed up to watch it, but not this time.
No, it's very important to know your limits, I think, especially when you're watching so much rugby, right? You can't do it all.
I know, exactly. And of the ones to miss, I think Canada USA was the one, because then that's just gonna be on Rugby Pass for free later anyway, so I can just watch that on like Monday or something. Anyway, exactly. Let's get straight into the game. No more mucking about. So South Africa won a thrilling encounter with the All Blacks. A comeback victory. They were 10 points down with something like 20 minutes to go. Very unusual to see that in Test rugby. Very rare comeback. Just generally, as an All Blacks fan, talk us through your emotions through that game, because it's fair to say that I think All Blacks generally in the cold light of day did a bit better than people were expecting.
I think so. I would like to have on record, Andy and I on our YouTube channel, I had said Springboks by 4, and that was what happened. So that's probably the first time ever I've got a prediction right. And look, as much as the Saffers wanted to try and shake off that favourites tag prior to the game, they're back-to-back Rugby World Cup champions. They are in fine form. They're playing some awesome rugby. They absolutely were the favourites. I think there's just a hard balance to strike as All Blacks fans, and we're obviously not very good losers historically and tend to take our team to task because of the high standards. So people kind of want to go, well, we don't accept losses and this isn't good enough and we want better and we want to drive high standards. But also, you're right, realistically, I think we did actually do better than most people had anticipated. And for 60 minutes, I do think we were the best team on the park, but it just doesn't matter when you give it all up with 20 minutes to go. So some real positives to take away. I think it's nice to know that despite that loss, it really shook us, I guess, against Argentina, that we are right up there. And we always, that's where we should be. And I'm hopeful for an improved performance and improved cohesion in this team as we progress, I guess, into next week, but also like into what's going to be a very, very difficult end of year tour up north.
Yeah, it's a bit like Manchester United fans in football just can't accept that they're not that team anymore. But I respect it a lot that All Blacks fans are like, no, we're the All Blacks. So you have lost 2 out of 3 so far off the back of a not convincing series against England as well. But then, like you said, the amount of change that you had and you're working on that cohesion. Was this the best game under Razor so far, do you think?
Yes. If you put the first half of this week and the first half of the game against Argentina at Eden Park and made an 80-minute Frankenstein, that would be great. But yeah, I think there were really good elements. And yeah, if it was a 60-minute game, it would have definitely been our best performance of the year. But like you say, we maybe people also just think that if we say that we should be doing better, then eventually we will do better. Like that's the key, is that we don't accept that we're not that team anymore. But maybe it's not even us not being that team anymore. It's that everyone else is risen, right? And the gap is so small, particularly between the top 5-6 teams. So yeah, no, a great win for South Africa, a great test match, a great advertisement for the game, and very much befitting of the rivalry and all the hype that we kind of had beforehand, eh?
Definitely. I think if you look at the form book, I don't know what the bookies' odds were, but if you look at the form book going in, you'd say South Africa should win this slightly comfortably. But it's not a derby, but it's like a derby in that form kind of goes out the window a bit, and it's like a one-off game between two teams that even if one is a lot better than the other in the heads of the players, it's a level game. Obviously, apart from that 57-0 game or whatever it was a few years ago, but generally these games are super tight. Who do you think were the standout performers for the All Blacks? We're talking All Blacks first. There's been lots of debate about the selections and Razor backing his Crusaders boys, even though they've not had a great Super Rugby season. And obviously, D-Mac getting a lot of attention for his role in the team as well, and how he dovetails with Beaudy. If the All Blacks had have won that game, I was trying to think who would have been player of the match, and I was struggling a little bit. Do you have an idea who do you think was the real standout candidates?
For me, I don't know if he would have won player of the match if we had won it, but for me, and it was very pleasing, it was Caleb Clarke. I just think he has, had a tumultuous time, I think, in the black jersey. Obviously, that dalliance with Sevens as well, that's been disruptive, I guess, to his place in the All Blacks team. But we know what he can do. His debut was incredible. But I think he took charge of himself this season, and he said, I've been doing the same things and getting the same results. How do I get better results? I have to do things differently. He dropped a bunch of weight. He's clearly been working on so many elements of his game, and it's just elevated him. And he had a great season for the Blues, and he's just been biding his time, and he's been given his opportunity, and he was great against Argentina at Eden Park, and I think he was better today. So for me, I was just really pleased for him, and I thought you could see as well that he was an important part of the game plan. That switch up where off the restart, D-Mac kind of passed it to Beaudy, and then they went for that kick with Caleb obviously trying to take advantage of the discrepancy in height with Colby, and it nearly paid off. So yeah, Caleb Clarke was a standout for me. Tupou Vaa'i had another really good game, I thought, and that was always going to be a challenge for him up against Springbok locks. Also, Geordie was really good, I thought, and as a long-time skeptic of Ethan Blackadder, I thought he was really impressive today as well. I text someone and I was like, he's playing one-man blitz defense. He was like, his line speed was kind of crazy, and obviously that's a risky game to play, but I think he covered it pretty well. So those are probably my standouts from my perspective. Were you toying up different names?
So you've mentioned the two that I was going to mention. So you've mentioned Ethan Blackadder, who got a lot of stick after the first test against Argentina, and I kind of felt that he was getting stick that Dalton Papali'i should have been getting. But I publicly backed Ethan, and I think he's really repaid me for that so far. I do think he has nailed down his spot in that jersey, although he should have passed to Caleb in the first minute. He did bomb a try, but he was generally very good other than that. And Caleb Clarke is the other one. So I've done a full 180 on Caleb Clarke. I thought he was rubbish 12 months ago. I was like, how is this guy playing for the All Blacks? And this season, like you said, he's really leaned down. He looks like he's in the best shape I've ever seen him in. And he's doing what he needs to do. Like you said, he had a great season for the Blues. And it's just good to see him come back, and he's maybe a little bit less razzle dazzle, but he's more functional now, and sometimes that's what you need from wingers these days. So I'm enjoying watching him play at the moment, definitely.
That brings me a lot of joy because, I think he just also, if you watch a lot of him, I think he's a real charisma machine. He genuinely loves his rugby. He comes from some real rugby pedigree here in New Zealand. So I'm really glad to see him doing well. And also a good story for people of if you're an aspiring player, it's in your control to change things and to work yourself back into a starting position or a position in the 23. And, so inspiring, shall we say.
Yes, but generally, what's going on with the wings and the wing selections at the moment with New Zealand? Because it started off the year with Reece and Talea, and now that's completely gone, and Jordan and Clark have come in. Now, Jordan, obviously, you can't criticize him coming back in for what he's done so far at test level. And arguably, Caleb Clark was the form winger from Super Rugby, but he started off with two different players. But now Reece is gone, but Talea is still on the bench. And it's one of my trigger points in rugby is wingers on the bench. Like, I get it if he was going to substitute D-Mac for Talea and then move Beaudy to 10 and Jordan to 15, but that's not what he did. It was a straight swap, I think, between Jordan and Talea. And for me, I'm like, what's that supposed to change? What's that supposed to do? So what's your view on the All Black wings at the moment and what the kind of juggling act between 3 or 4 players is at the moment?
Yeah, it's certainly interesting, and obviously any good All Blacks team is, a real battle in terms of competitiveness in the outside backs. I guess maybe the spanner in the works is that you've kind of got this world-class winger playing in your centres. Not saying that I'm a put Rico on the wing, because I actually have a lot of belief in him in the centres, particularly defensively. But I guess any game plan or plans around substitutions, you've kind of got this like, well, we've got Rico on there. If we need to, we can just shuffle him to the wing. And I thought maybe I heard that in the commentary today, that he was playing a bit on the wing in the second half.
He did, because they brought ALB on, and Rico went to the wing, and then they swapped Jordan for Talea. So they actually changed both wings in the game.
Oh, I see. Yep. Gotcha. Yeah. I don't know. I also thought that Will Jordan's going to be playing fullback the entirety of this season, like whether starting or coming on in that capacity off the bench. So I am kind of surprised that he's been ushered back in at wing. I know that he hasn't had much test experience at fullback, and he obviously is a very proven performer on the wing for us. So maybe just based on form alone, they're like, well, that's what we've got to do. I do think Talea has been a bit short on form this year, but what he maybe doesn't have in form, he always does make a real effort, right? He's a busy winger. So that obviously is going to be a positive for him. I do think I would have liked to see Imoni Narawa in the squad. I think he's a great, great winger, and maybe we're missing someone a bit more like him in our wing stocks. But yeah, it's a puzzle I wouldn't want to be in charge of putting together, because there's a wealth of talent, but it seems like we haven't quite kind of put it together perfectly yet.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like trying to shoehorn all the best players in. That's what Beaudy at 15 has always felt a little bit like for me. Of you can't not have Beaudy on the pitch, and especially in the England series, the thing that everybody was saying was every time Beaudy came on, it was like, oh, the adult is here, the grown up is here to sort the kids out. How are you rating Beaudy this season? He spent the year in Japan again. He's performing well for me.
Yeah. I don't think today was his best game. There was some what was that kick at halftime when he kicked it out, but the hooter hadn't gone, so it was play on. That was a real. I was like, oh no. I was like, that's the altitude hitting the brain. I personally am thinking that by the end of the year, it should be, if Will Jordan is fit and confident playing at 15, I think Beaudy is the ultimate bench player. And my brother-in-law made a comment to me. I don't watch much basketball, but he spoke about the sixth man concept in basketball, which is like often one of your better players, but they're not in the starting team, and you bring them on. And the point of when you bring them on is that it's against fatigued players or potentially the second stringers who are coming in off the bench. And so you're there to kind of rip them open because you're highly skilled and proficient. And I think that was what we saw, that sort of concept from Beaudy against England, and that was what made him so effective. And obviously he has the rugby IQ to be able to make the most of that and manipulate that hugely. So that's my personal opinion. But like, am I going to be upset if Beaudy's starting at 15? No, because like you say, he has a wealth of experience. He has a wealth of rugby intelligence. He also is clearly still in pretty good physical nick. And I think he's worked around, and that's the sign of a true professional, isn't it? That he knows he's like, oh, I've not got the gas that I used to have so much, but how can I improve my game and continue one-upping myself? And to still be in the conversation and still be revered as highly as he is at this point in his career, 10, it's really impressive. So, Beaudy on the field, I'm never going to turn my nose up at it. I think tactically, him coming on off the bench is a better use of him and his skills, but who knows where the final kind of 23 and what that looks like come November.
Absolutely. I think there was a moment there where there were some people saying, oh, Beaudy was never really that player. And I was like, I watched him. He was. And now he's kind of back, but like you said, in a different ways, adapted his game, not using the pace like he used to and things. So I think he's really performing well. Before we just move off the All Blacks, as someone I know that you've been talking about and someone that I've been talking about a little bit as well, the Sam Cane redemption. Talk me through your view on that, because I kind of seen it coming a little bit. I have to be honest. I think Razor has, and this is just me in my tinfoil hat. I think Razor's been getting to grips with the dressing room a little bit, and I think the bringing Sam Cane back in was to help that. And obviously, he's played 2 club games off the bench against Argentina. Now he's back starting. So, talk me through your view on the Sam Cane rehabilitation.
Yeah, I mean, it's the perfect narrative, is it not? So I think that's sort of why I've been rooting for it as well, as like what a story that would be. Yeah, I think even when, in the peaks of sort of last year or 2022, and people were going, oh, Sam Cane this, Sam Cane that, I think he has still, throughout that time, been our number 1, number 7, and he is our most physical presence in the breakdown. And so I do like Dalton Papali'i. I do think he's had a really good season with the Blues, and he's been topping a lot of the statistics that you would be wanting your number 7 to top throughout this year. But I just don't think that we've found someone who has as much of a presence as Sam Cane. And I'm sorry, but no one looks as scary as Sam Cane does when he's standing in the tunnel and he's got that kind of possessed look on his face. No one incites fear in this team as much as that Sam Cane does. So, I think it was entirely necessary, potentially a risk given his lack of playing time. And, that was he hadn't played since, January, because of that back injury.
Yeah.
But I guess they're putting a lot of faith in him as a professional and his experience, but also I guess their team and making sure that he's safe and well and able to play. And I thought he was actually really strong against the Springboks. I don't think he had a standout game. And I know I think he gave away 1 penalty for that high tackle, which like heart and throat stuff. I was like, oh God. But I think he allowed us to impose our physicality in a way that allowed us to expose parts of the Springbok game and kind of impose ourselves early in that match.
Yeah, let me just see if I can see his stats for a second. I'm already on dominant tackles. That's well organised from me. Only 1 dominant hit, but I think it was a big one on Sia. I want to say it was a big hit on. Just generally, I agree with you. I think he imposed himself quite well. I'm on the wrong game entirely there, so I'll skip over that. Right. Let's talk about the Springboks then. So what changed then? On the hour mark, I've seen some people say that the All Blacks stopped playing. Some people crediting the substitutes that the Springboks were able to bring on. I kind of felt like, I'm a stats person, and I look at the stats, and the stats all say that the best team won. All of the Springboks numbers are bigger in the numbers that you'd want to be bigger and smaller in the numbers that you want to be smaller. But there was a lot of mistakes in that first hour from the Springboks, a lot of sloppy mistakes. Ben Jason Dixon sadly didn't survive, making 2 mistakes. He was off. I always find that the Boks get really disrupted when they have to make a second row replacement early in the game. When Norkia had to come off and Etzebeth had to come on. It was the same against Ireland, where RG Snyman came on early as well. It just kind of knocks them out of whack. It's like, this isn't supposed to be happening and things. So for you, what was the turning point? What was the trigger? What was the thing did the Boks just cut out the mistakes? Did the All Blacks go into their shells? What's your thoughts?
I think, yeah, the easy thing to point at is the substitutions, but I think it's more around when the substitutions got into the game. So I don't think the substitutions made an immediate impact for the Springboks, but I think they started to make an impact at the exact same time that the All Blacks started to roll their bench and bring on a few more players who don't necessarily have that test experience and who probably, for a lot of them, the 23, 24-year-olds, actually have never played a game in South Africa in their lives. So I
Yeah.
think it was probably a bit of a perfect storm of like, okay, yeah, the Springboks, the bomb squad came on and they maybe didn't make an immediate impact, but they got into the game, they found their feet, they found their rhythm, their ascendancy, and it just coincided perfectly with, where we rolled changes, we were getting tired, all of those sorts of things. So I think that was it for me. I did feel a little bit, and this is completely eye test and not backed by much, that the Springboks know how to win games and have known how to win games, tight games. And I think what they did is they didn't necessarily bin the game plan that they've been developing, but I think they reverted to a few more of those things that they know win them games and that they are well drilled in and that are innate in their DNA. And at first, when I thought about that, I was like, oh, well, that's, they try and play this game plan that they can't stick with for 80 minutes. But then, or, when the going gets tough. But then when you think about it more, and I remember watching an interview with Razor prior to him starting, and he said, for you to be able to be a competitive team at the top of men's international rugby at the moment, you have to be able to win 3 or 4 different ways. And I think that was what it was. They said, you know what, we got something else in our pocketbook. Let's, roll this out or roll it out to some degree or marry it with what we've been trying to do because we know that wins us games. And that's what happened.
Yeah, Harry Jones spoke about this on his podcast. He said that when you're under pressure like that, and there's no higher pressure than All Blacks versus South Africa, you do kind of revert to type a little bit. And I do think there were a couple of times in the game where a Springbok saw an All Black in front of him and was just like, I'm just going to run at him as hard as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't necessarily what we saw against Australia, although maybe the Australians just kind of got out of the way. I do think it was a slightly off performance for a lot of it against South Africa. I thought that the replacements made a great impact. Everyone's talking about Quagga. Elric Lowe, I think, is a fantastic player. I've been tracking him all the way through URC. He was top of the ball stats, carries and tackles pretty much every week. And he's carried that into the Springboks as well. I thought he was super unlucky to get left out of the initial squad for Ireland. And now he's shown that Razzie should have been with him as well. Ruan Nokia, another player that wasn't initially getting a look in. Another Bulls player. And is in now and had a fantastic game, called 10 lineouts to himself. And there was a bit where initially I thought it might have been Malcolm Marks, but the Springboks lineout went a bit awry for a minute during the game. Nokia came back on and then it got fixed again. So that tells a story. So I would love to see him keep his spot, but we can't skirt around him any longer. Sacha Feinberg-mngomezulu. This was this guy's third ever elite start in a fly half jersey. He didn't play 10 at all for the Stormers in URC this season. It's cheating, isn't it? Like, have you ever seen a player go from not existing to arguably the best 10 in the world this fast?
He is just so exciting. Oh my goodness. I was watching with my partner who had never seen Sacha in action, and he was, in awe. And I think the most impressive part of his performance for me was that it was not a perfect performance. He had some real challenges. There were moments where he did things that he would have been like, oh my gosh, what the heck did I just do? But he wasn't flustered by them. He didn't let it override his game. He continued to keep trying the things he was trying to do, and he pulled them off. And that's big game temperament. That is going to be a long-time test player, someone who can get there on your third test and not be shaken by making mistakes in the biggest arena. So no, he was hugely impressive, and certainly I think for a lot of Kiwis who maybe have never seen him play and maybe never heard of him before this game, like, you are on notice, well and truly.
Yeah, it's like climbing stairs, because when at the beginning of the URC season, at first it was only people who'd watched him play schools rugby in South Africa, and so everyone was kind of whispering like, "Hey, watch out for this kid, he's really good." And then it got to like the first game, he had the famous juggling on the knee try against the Lions that went viral, and everyone was like, "Oh, this guy's pretty good. Keep an eye on this guy." And then for me, I watched him play against Cardiff, which the Stormers actually lost that game, but he was unbelievable in that game. He was doing stuff that I'd never seen. So that's when I bought stocks, and then it just got on, and then more people discovered him when he made his debut against Wales, and then more and more people have been discovering him. So it's been fun watching this thing grow. But it's just I know, like you said, he has been making mistakes, but it doesn't. He plays with his chest out, and I'm like, you're 22 and you've never done this before. Could you be a bit shy? Could you not be coming off the bench against Pollard and looking a bit ropey rather than being clearly the best player in the two best teams in the world playing against each other? What the hell?
Yeah. Well, and it's maybe a little bit jarring for people as well, right? Like there's kind of an order to things in the sport sometimes, and this is the way you're meant to go and the certain path you're meant to follow. And so he's certainly arrived on the scene with more than a splash. I'm very excited. Like I'm an All Blacks fan. I shouldn't be excited about a Springbok 10. When have I ever said that? Come on. Actually, that's not true. I was a Francois Steyn stan. But in saying that, it feels hugely exciting for the game of rugby. And, he's clearly charismatic. He's born for this. That's what it is, right? He's born for this.
People have been calling him an industry plant. And I think that's a very good way of describing him. I just go on about him a bit more. His kick, the 60-meter one, I was distracted for a second, and then I saw him shaping up a kick, and it was the close up of him putting it on the tee, and I was like, oh, okay, he's going for a kick. And then it cut to the wide angle, and I was like, Jesus, that's a long way away. Like, I know it's at altitude of the things, but still, that's a long kick. And then he kicked it, and it went over the dead ball line, nearly went into the stands. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. I don't think anybody else is going to get a shot at the Springbok 10 jersey while you're around, mate. I think you might have got it. So this is crazy, but that just makes me want to cuddle Manny Lebok because I love Manny so much. And he's the goal kicking thing with Manny is just such tars him because everything about him other than that is amazing. It's literally only the goal kicking that's a problem, and he's such a joy to watch. But now people are like saying, "Time to learn Japanese, mate," and it might be, which makes me sad because Sacha and Manny are both at the Stormers as well, and Damien Willemse. It's just crazy.
It's wild that the Boks are doing all of this and Willemse is just waiting in the sidelines. We haven't seen him this season.
I know. Fassi had a good game. That's just made me think about the Springbok fullback position. The way that Fassi uses his pace is really fun to watch, and it's kind of like that's constant acceleration, like he's still accelerating. That's what Beaudy used to do with the acceleration, so that's fun to watch. My unpopular take of the podcast: Damien de Allende is an incredible rugby player. I'm not sure how much longer he is going to be in this Springbok team, because I think that the new game plan mightn't be he might not be the best player for that. He might be the best player at the moment, but there might be another player who comes along. It could even be Lukhanyo Am, who plays in that 12 jersey. Now, like I said, he's an incredible player, but if I've got like a world-class, incredible, best state-of-the-art jackhammer, I'm not going to use it to change the wheels on my bike. So that's kind of my thing with Damien de Allende. I think he's amazing, but I'm just not sure he's the best player for the Springboks moving forward in that 12 jersey. But you are pulling faces, so I'm assuming that you disagree.
No. It didn't go where I thought it was going to go. So I can. Yeah, he is amazing. I thought he had an incredible game. Obviously, his presence in the breakdown is huge as well for them. I think that's potentially where we're at with a number of the Boks players at the moment, and many people know that they're probably the team, particularly in the Rugby Championship, who have had the most continuity since last year, not just with coaches, but with players as well. They're making an active effort to blood a lot of new people, Sacha, Fassi, etc., Notkia, but also there are a number of people who potentially aren't going to be at the next World Cup, and they're in this stage of like quite radical evolution in terms of how or what they are trying to make brand Springbok rugby. Tony Brown rugby. As a Highlanders fan. So yeah, I can respect your take. I can respect your take. I'll put it there. I'll put it there.
Right. So predictions for next week then in Cape Town. How do you see it going? What changes, if any, would you like to see to the All Blacks lineup and changes to tactics, and how do you see the game panning out?
I'm happy with the 15 staying the same. I can't see what changes you would like. The bench arguably wasn't as effective, but I actually don't know what other changes you would make to it. And other than putting Beaudy on the bench,
Yeah.
But then that involves maybe Jordan starting at 15 in a cauldron sort of big test. That is realistically a must-win for the All Blacks. Yeah, I don't really.
Imagine being 1 from 4 in the Rugby Championship.
I know it is a tough draw. Two against the Springboks at home is hard, but I feel more optimistic about a win next week than I probably did heading into this one because of how we played. It feels like fine margins as always. Discipline, if we can sort that out, please. That would have been our game. So I'm just praying that I guess the thing with the Boks in that game is that it felt like they weren't playing their best, right? So how much better can they get in a week? Feels like maybe it could be more than how much better we could get in a week at the moment. But I don't know. We shall see. But yeah, I thought Finau was actually not great off the bench. So maybe, if Dalton's injured, maybe you bring a Satiti in off the bench. That'd be a pretty big test. But he's a big carrier, and obviously has been under the tutelage of Ardie Savia, in the All Blacks, which can only be of benefit to him. I think Ardie probably needs to have. He got pretty well suffocated, if you will, in this game by the Boks. So I think he'll be pretty eager to rectify that. And we know that a salty Ardie Savia often produces some magic. So I'm hoping for that next week, I think.
Yeah, definitely he does. For the Boks, obviously there's 2 injuries. It looks like Khaleesi's fractured his cheekbone, which generally don't tend to be a very long-term injury. It's normally only 2 or 3 weeks, but he should miss Cape Town.
Unless you're Antoine Dupont at the World Cup.
Yeah, when you have a team of NASA scientists crowding around you to rebuild your face. So I think I would bring Elric Lowe in for Siya Kolisi, and then I think Arendse, he was out. He got knocked out. That was pretty tough to watch because he has been on fire. So Mapimpi's the winger who's been playing if it's not been one of Colby or Arendse, but I'd be tempted that Canan Moodie is playing Currie Cup at the moment and he's playing pretty well. So I would be tempted to bring in Canan Moodie, although he's he's been in and out. Mind you, I'm pretty sure that I read that Mapimpi scored a hat-trick for the Sharks yesterday. So
I think I saw wasn't it in like 27 minutes or something ridiculous?
Yeah. So
Pimpy.
So maybe that'll be what happens. So those are the 2 changes that I would expect. And then we'll see what happens with Ben Jason Dixon as well. I've got my friend Jade I can hear him in my ear saying that there'll be a lot more All Blacks fans in Cape Town as well. Yes. I won't go there. And I genuinely don't know. It's the same as the first game for me. The Boks should win, but you never know with these games. You never know with these games. If they just make fewer errors, it should be a little bit more comfortable. I guess.
Well, at this point, the Boks are on a 3-game winning streak over the All Blacks, as much as it pains me to admit. And those have been 3 wildly, wildly different games, right? We had yesterday a high-scoring but close affair. Then we had like the low-scoring close affair of the Rugby World Cup final. And then we got absolutely spanked 35-7. So who knows? You really, like you say, form counts for very little. But I don't. They're just a little bit tense for 3 a.m. for me. Like my heart rate, I'm like sitting in bed. I'm like, this doesn't feel right for such a tense game. And then I can't go back to sleep after because the adrenaline's pumping. So the sport probably slowly killing me.
Yeah. Oh, tell me about it. Right. We will be getting into Argentina versus Australia chat later in the show, but before we do, just want to remind our YouTube viewers that we do offer membership on our YouTube channel. So we have nearly a dozen videos that are exclusive to members only, and you can get access to them for just £1 a month, which is the lowest that YouTube lets us set the price. We don't rely on the podcast for income, but it does currently cost us money to make. So if anybody is up for helping us cover those costs, we really appreciate it. Okay, before we do Los Pumas against the Wallabies, let's talk about you a little bit more. So tell us your rugby story then. How did you get into the sport? What's your background, etc., etc.?
Well, I have never played rugby in my life, so puts me in the perfect position to have opinions about it. No, my dad played. He was a junior All Black, was a classic, like I would have been an All Black if I didn't get injured sort of situation. He got injured in his probables versus possibles trial and did his shoulder. So I think Jock Hobbs became the All Blacks flanker that year. So we like to say that without Dad, we wouldn't have had Jock Hobbs. But so kind of grew up in and around rugby. Where I grew up, we didn't have like a boys first 15 at school, so the thought of like a girls rugby team, definitely not either. I grew up in Queenstown, so it was very much a skiing, ice hockey sort of place. So yeah, didn't play in any capacity, but I think like a lot of kids, bonding with your parents over rugby, getting up, watching games, and I just am kind of a little bit neurotic. So I had to be like, I know everything. I'd go and learn all the team names. I'd recite them in front of my mum and dad's friends, just to be like, look what I know.
I relate.
Yeah, exactly. Not obnoxious at all. And so then, yeah, always been obsessed with rugby, but I don't think I'm necessarily like rugby's prime audience by any means. I have a lot of interests, outside of that. I'm a big pop music girly. I'm a big fashion girly. So yeah, have always been in an interesting place, I guess, as a viewer. And then I went to university. I studied media studies, but I finished university, graduated, and ended up in a very different career. But I'm kind of have been trying to maneuver my way out of that career. And I used to remember being a kid saying, well, I always want to be a news reporter and I want to go to the World Cup and I want to be the sports reporter on the news. And I was sitting there sort of at 27 saying to myself, well, the only thing stopping you from doing that is kind of you, And I felt that I had the skills and the knowledge to at least tell interesting stories. But I knew that I didn't have the requisite skills and experience to show an employer. So I kind of looked at TikTok and said to myself, well, there's a bit of an opportunity there to just do something, and put myself out there, which was very intimidating. I didn't have an Instagram prior to that. I wasn't really using Facebook. I didn't want to be perceived at all. So it's been a real switch. And yeah, so around just before the Rugby World Cup, the Men's Rugby World Cup, I was having all these conversations with my friends about the red card fiasco and the thresholds around HAAs and Knox and Owen Farrell and George Moala and that whole saga, because to me that had everything. It was drama, it was gossip, it was tea, And I was having conversations with many of my friends who had not one care in the world about rugby. And I was just like, oh, maybe more people would kind of be interested in this story. So that was the first video I made on TikTok and was very fortunate that it did really well. So
isn't it like 2 million views now or something?
Yeah, that was silly. It was really silly. It was like I was swiping my phone and it was mad. And so that, it was really fortunate because I guess, you all want to do well at something. And if it wasn't doing well, would I have been motivated to keep going? But yeah, so that was my first video. And, I went all through the Rugby World Cup making daily content and then said to myself, oh, well, I might have to pivot because maybe I'm going to run out of things to talk about after the World Cup. No, have not. But yeah, and so then started making Instagram reels as well and have somehow managed to weasel my way into kind of being part of, the media delegation for rugby here. And that's been awesome. So a very wild series of events. The internet is a wild place.
That is awesome. When you say about checking your phone and refreshing and thing, do you get the thing like that when of something, whether it's a post or a video or something, blows up? Do you get the thing of like a no, I didn't mean it. Like stop watching. Like I get the toughest lesson. I had someone asking me about starting on YouTube the other day, and I was like, just be aware that there is no correlation between effort and views. Like some of the biggest things that I posted, maybe less so on YouTube, but more so on TikTok, are things that I kind of posted and almost forgot that I'd made. And then I check back later and I'm like, oh my God. And sometimes you're like, did I say something bad? Am I getting cancelled? Just rewatch it, make sure I didn't accidentally do that. Is that just me, or do you get that as well?
Oh, I incredibly anxious all the time about everything I put out on the internet and people finding it. The worst bit for me is people at work, because I still work a full-time job not related to this at all, and people come up to me and go, oh, I saw your video, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, what do you want me to say to that? Like,
I had the worst
okay.
thing. I had the worst thing ever happen to me at work. I for whatever reason I was listening back to a podcast and on my Bluetooth headphones, and then I went to get lunch. I turned my headphones off, and then I went to get lunch, and I came back, and my voice was coming out of my laptop out loud in the office talking about rugby, and I was like, oh my God. Fortunately, only one person was like, was that you? Like, what were you talking about?
Oh, it's like being a secret agent. You've got this like double life.
Yeah, it is. And
You expose yourself.
Part of me was like, do I just flat out deny it? So I just like, no, that wasn't me. Don't know what that was. God, someone must have hacked my computer. That's so weird.
It's so weird. I don't know how that happened.
But so TikTok specifically, what advice would you give to someone who is getting into TikTok? Is daily? Do you have to post something every day for you?
I think consistency is really important on that app. I don't know why, but I think it just rewards you for like using the app and being on the app. But yeah, I think being able to commit to doing daily content. I mean, when I say daily, I think I've done 6 videos a week for most of since I started, and then I've taken like 2 weeks off over Christmas, and I just took a week off recently to go on holiday. So like, be mindful of yourself and what you can actually do. But yeah, that was my big thing to myself. I wasn't going to start it unless I could commit to being regular and consistent with it. And what other, I think engaging obviously with other creators is really helpful, just to build your own sense of community on there. And then obviously you can engage in their comments and stuff, and that helps probably bring visibility to you. I think maybe this is more my personal opinion, but try and bring value with your content. I know it's easy to just like rage bait and to like engagement farm a little bit, and to especially like South Africans, we love you, but they will take the bait always. And I know that it feels easy to just
I did a tweet off the pirate account last night or this morning about, I said, Sacha kind of reminds me of DuPont in a way. And my God, some people bit hard.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think personally, and this is just my own view, I don't speak for everyone, but I want things that content that's going to teach me things, I'm going to learn things, or maybe an insightful kind of perspective, and that obviously builds trust, and then you have people who want to come back for your content and intentionally seek out your content. So I think while it may be a bit of a longer slog in order to build up an audience, I think just making sure that you are sticking to your values sounds a little bit too like altruistic for content, talking about TikTok, but just bringing value and saying something that you can stand behind and isn't just like making people angry on the internet. And I think as well, it's important with rugby, like we do want to actually be telling positive stories. It's really easy in all facets of rugby discourse on the internet to kind of, we've got slow motion replays of high tackles, we've got, all sorts, and it's important to talk about those things. And that's how I got my start, talking about that whole discourse and what it meant for rugby and, the HIA lawsuit and all of that. But I think also making sure you can tell some negative stories if you need to, or you want to, or you think that's interesting, but also making sure to highlight the good things that are happening in our sport, because there are heaps of things that are really amazing.
Definitely. I definitely have a set of rules for myself of this is the kind of content that I make and this is the kind of content that I don't make. And I think I would suggest people definitely do that. And yeah, remember as well that it is a two-way relationship with your audience. So you don't just put something out and then it's fine. You do get feedback. And
Yeah.
so you have to think to yourself, what kind of interaction do you want to have with people? And if someone wants to have a go at me for being too positive, and that's the kind of criticism I'm happy to face. Whereas I don't want to have a reaction of having been really critical of a player, overly critical of a player, and that turning into something unpleasant. So that's the kind of rules that you set out for yourself. I find aggressive TikTok commenters to be the weirdest commenters across all like YouTube, Twitter, TikTok. I find, because I'm like, dude, like the next video you're going to watch is going to be a teenager dancing. Like, why are you getting so angry, mate? Like, I'm here.
I've had some absolute great comments. Most of them I just laugh at because they're so ridiculous. I used to have them screenshotted, but I probably don't have them here. Lots of like, oh, there was a filter going around recently, and this was like the easiest content I ever made. They finally made like a ranking list for rugby players on TikTok, and so it spits out players and you have to rank them, but obviously you can't move them once you've ranked them. So if you get a player, you don't know who's coming next, but everyone took great offense. I think I got disowned by my own country people for ranking Ma'anonu as number 7, but I got him like second. I didn't know who else was coming, and then everyone got very mad at me for that. And then someone commented saying, this is why women don't make tier lists. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize tier lists were only for men. Damn. Just like out the gate stuff. So yeah, I think that maybe there's another piece of advice there is like take every comment. Obviously, if someone's engaging with you constructively and providing feedback that's actually helpful, but learn what like isn't helpful, and you can just kind of brush that off.
Yeah, I have to say, it makes me check my privilege, because I have to remember, like, I'm a white heterosexual man. So there's the kind of feedback that I don't get, which is lucky enough. But even when I make content about women's rugby, then I get a window into it, and I'm like, what are you doing?
I know. Anyway, at that point, when they're commenting on, like, especially around women's rugby and stuff, and I'm like, well, at least look, you're giving me some engagement. We're boosting the profile of the sport, but like, why are you so mad about this?
I've had men genuinely think that they can give tips and tricks to women playing in Olympic gold medal finals. I'm like, mate, I think she knows better than you.
Yeah. Jeez.
Anyway, right. Less of that. So last thing before we talk about Argentina or Australia then. So your series that's done really well lately is talking about rugby Instagram, and this massively struck a chord with me because I rage about, particularly in Wales, the absolute inept marketing that exists around rugby in Wales. And this is something that I've now seen reflected in the stuff that you were talking about the Rugby Championship. So just give people an intro into what triggered you here.
I had been looking at the Rugby Championship Instagram account for like a couple of months prior to the tournament starting, actually during under-20s, because they actually did quite a good job of the under-20s. There was shareable reels, like highlights reels, video content, but they were posting semi-regularly, which was kind of good. But I just was keeping my eye on the Rugby Championship because I was like, the competition's starting soon. Like, when are we going to start getting some hype from the account that is the competition? Thinking about, with an eye to, say, the Six Nations, which is posting all the time. And it sort of got to the week before the games starting, and the only thing that had been posted was stories where they'd just post a picture that like clearly was from like Google Images. It would be like the coach, and it would say TRC News with a link, Springbok squad announcement, and then a link to a website to read the Springbok squad announcement. And it was all like not formatted. It wasn't designed in any way. It was just a photo and then like Instagram text, like how a regular person would post on Instagram. And I was baffled by it. There were no posts in the feed, and I couldn't understand how the competition is not building any hype for this tournament. And I understand that as a competition rather than as the team itself on social media, like their access to players and all that sort of thing is a lot different. And I also recognize that SANZAAR is a very small organization in terms of the actual people who work there directly for SANZAAR, and that potentially it's just
Isn't it like one office in Australia or something?
Something like that. I think there's like 4 or 5 staff members. So, potentially, or what's likely is that the role of maintaining that social media has been given to someone who has another job and they don't have the time nor resources to maintain it properly. So I'm like empathetic to that, but it's also not good enough in 2024. And again, especially when you compare it to our counterparts in the Northern Hemisphere, but also many other competitions, also compared to Super Rugby. And I think that was what made me most not upset, but one, we deserve so much better for a competition that includes the 2 biggest brands in World Rugby history, and also like is 3 of the most successful teams in World Rugby history. And so, yeah, they just don't really post. They clearly are recycling graphics. There's no use of hashtags.
Oh, yeah, there was the one where they copied and pasted the one from last week or something, the score from last week.
Yeah, they posted last year's points table.
Yeah, that was it, yeah.
Yeah, they don't post. I saw they posted the full-time score for the South Africa All Blacks game. It was sort of like 8 hours late. So they're also not building trust in their brand, because then if I was wanting to go and get a score after the game, if I hadn't watched it, I'd be going to other content creators who are making full-time score graphics rather than going to the actual account, which is just wild. And yeah, they don't have any shareable content, so nothing in terms of highlights, reels. I imagine that like video, I imagine that's something to do with broadcasting being difficult, the broadcasting rights and stuff. But at this point, you need to be coming up with creative solutions to figure that out, because it's just not good enough. It doesn't really fly. And there's no sort of, shareable stats. So like, I feel like you are doing more work for creating content around sharing stats in the Rugby Championship than the actual account is. They just post full-time scores. Sometimes they post the standings if we're lucky, and they post lineups and potentially head-to-head from the last last match between those teams. So, there's nothing like, oh, here are our top 5 try scorers in the competition this year, or like our highest tackle counts in the competition, or a standout player, and here are their stats. And that. I'm a random lady with with a media studies degree. It's not even like comms or anything like that, and I can think of these things. Like, imagine what you could do if you put some care and effort into it. And I know of so many amazing social media managers who work for the Super Rugby teams who are off contract, well, not off contract, in off season at the moment. Like, you could pay them to do the duration of the tournament. That's not going to be that much of a cost across all 4 unions. But yeah, so I'm baffled. I want so much better. And so, I started posting about it, and people have taken up the mantle, and all of their comments are just people being like, what is happening with this account?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you draw the comparison of TRC is on, 20,000, you've probably contributed to their growth, to be honest. And the Six Nations is on 1 million. It's like, that's a difference. But the TRC, like, even the profile pic, you can't tell what it is from the profile pic.
No. And like, we were talking about it earlier, right? Like, the actual logo isn't even fit for social media, right? It's landscape. It doesn't fit on anything.
Landscape logos.
Yeah. And again, social media is the cheaper side of the marketing thing, right? Like, it's kind of free promo.
You need some idiot with one of these is all you need, and then you can do it.
Exactly.
For audio listeners, I'm holding up a phone.
Exactly. Whereas, paying for billboards and radio ads and TV placements, like, that's the stuff.
Oh my God, you're going to trigger me because the Scarlet's idea of marketing is zip tying a poster to a lamppost.
Oh.
In town centre.
There's a little bit of like organic word of mouth cutesy about that, maybe.
Not when the population of the town is 35,000.
Oh.
God, the things I could tell you about Welsh Rugby. Like, I could tell you that one of the regions did not post a single video content to either TikTok or YouTube for the first 3 months of 2024. I could tell you that one of the regions had a derby, the Boxing Day derby, which is the biggest game of the year. And it got to the point where fans were tweeting the club, are you going to promote this game? Because you haven't tweeted about it in 2 weeks. I know that one of the regions, if you go on their website, the marketing manager and the commercial manager that are listed, neither of them work there anymore. And the person who does work there, I know, has recently left, and I believe the role is vacant. Like it's like I know that one of the regions was played a friendly, and the team they were playing against asked, "Can we live stream the game on our YouTube channel for free?" And the club said no, but didn't provide an alternative, so the game was just unstreamed in 2024. There was a game which fans couldn't watch. Like, my thing is, do you think it's not important? I know there's I'm going on a bit of a rant here. I know there's a region where a TikToker who has 150,000 followers reached out to a region and said, "I will make you content for free because I'm a fan of yours. I will come down with my phone and make a load of content for you. I've already made it for the Six Nations official account. I'll make it for you for free." Did not get a response from the region. Like, what?
Well, and that's the thing with this rugby championship stuff is like, and I'm not by any means the biggest rugby creator at all, but I've done, I talk about the competition and I'm like, damn, you clearly don't care about social media enough. Like, I'm doing this for you for free, Yeah. And but outside of that, it's such an opportunity to grow. And we talk all the time in the Southern Hemisphere, particularly in Australia and New Zealand at the moment, about how we need to grow the game and how we also need to improve the fan experience. And social media is like the clearest opportunity to do that. And so, like you say, if you don't care, why don't you care? And why don't you see this as an opportunity? It just blows my mind. It blows my mind. But if you're looking for a little giggle, go and look at the Rugby Championship Instagram account because it's funny. It's funny.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
To end it on a positive then, why is women's rugby social media so much better?
I think women's rugby have clued in pretty early onto the fact that we should be promoting kind of personality, athlete first, right? So it's less about the brand of the team and more about who are the people in our team, who are the people who you can identify with, attach yourself to, relate to, all of those sorts of things. So, and they also take charge of it themselves, right? Like you look at Caitlin Vahakolo here, she does her own social media stuff as well as alongside being, so she's known as more than just like, oh, that's Black Fern Caitlin Vahakolo. It's like, oh, you can go and watch KV on TikTok and she's, obsessed with Lilo and Stitch and she's doing these hauls and her sister's a singer and all this stuff. So I think just that's the opportunity, I guess, of being a new space and a growing kind of developing sport is there's so many opportunities to do things so differently. And it seems to be paying off because I think, they can see how much of a growth motivator social media is for them and they're really tapping into it.
Yeah. And I just think generally about women's rugby that more people are doing their jobs on merit rather than who they're mates with from back in the day. Right. Right, so let's finally talk about Australia versus Argentina then, or Argentina versus Australia. So I only watched the first half because I went to sleep, but you were a trooper and watched the full thing. So Australia got the job done by a point, a last-minute penalty kick by none other than Ben Donaldson. In the first half, I was watching Australia and I was like, where have I seen this before? And then I remembered, oh, Warren Gatland's Wales. Loads of phases and then a cross-field kick. That's our thing. But it kind of worked. It was a narrow win over Argentina, who are a bit Jekyll and Hyde. What conclusions do you take from that?
They needed it. They needed it 100%. So for the players, like this would have meant so much. And you could kind of tell at the end of the game, right? It's a win. It's their first. I know obviously last year was condensed, but theoretically it's their, I don't know why I said theoretically because it's not theoretical at all. It's their first win in the Rugby Championship since 2022. So that's important. They just needed it. I think confidence is really something that they've been lacking for a long time, right? And, we've all heard stories about what Eddie Jones does to players' confidence. And I think that has shown in this team. And maybe just confidence for them, that they are on the right track. It might be a long, windy, slow track, but the path is laid out for them. It was crazy conditions as well. So I think, like you say, this was just a bit of a coin toss of a game, and Aussie maybe lucky and for the first time in a long time got the rub of the green in more ways than one.
Yeah. So a high number of carries, like I said, is quite a Northern Hemisphere way of doing it. Maybe Joe Schmidt's reaching back into his Ireland playbook a little bit of how he managed to get the best out of that team. I do think in the first half, Argentina were clearly the better team. They seem to be a bit more physical. So I'm not sure maybe what fell off in the second half. tiring maybe, but it clearly did. The point of debate that I'm seeing on social media most about Australia, which is the same for most nations, is Noah Lolesio and the 10 debates. Now, I don't really see an alternative to him. I think Ben Donaldson is the outstanding candidate other than him, but I've also seen people not rating him either. Do you back Lolesio as Aussie's 10 moving forward?
I think I've just firmly fell into the camp this year of like, if you're a 10, you're a new 10, you need time in the seat. Purely based off, I think, the All Blacks experience with Richie Mo'unga. So much faffing about with him, back and forth, him, Beaudy, oh, D-Mac, Richie Mo'unga, and everyone being like, oh, he's not the guy, to eventually kind of solidifying his place late 2022, 2023, was one of the best players at the Rugby World Cup, now is one of the best players in the world, not playing in our team. And so now, and then we've got people going, oh, well, D-Mac's not the guy, we need Richie Mo'unga back. And I was like, you were saying this about Richie Mo'unga a year ago. So I think we need to learn from our mistakes, give them time in the seat. So what applies for D-Mac applies for Lolesio. I'm not obsessed with Ben Donaldson. I can see, there are critics of him out there that maybe don't think he's the guy either. A lot of people talk about Tom Lynagh, son of former Wallaby international Michael Lynagh, and also Tane Edmed, who is currently in New Zealand playing NPC for North Harbour. So there's options there. I think they've all had a little bit of contact time with Joe and with the Wallabies this season. So I think there's deputies there. Many people I saw were saying, oh, well, we should be looking to the future and developing Lynagh, but Noah Lolesio is only 24. He's so young.
I know, it's crazy how fast people move on from people.
Yeah, and it's just, I think he may not be the answer. Who knows? But you got to give him a good season to kind of show whether he is or not. And it is still early days in this Australian team and their rebuild and their season this year. Yeah,
Lolesio has had a great 12 months as well, because he went to Toulon as a World Cup joker and was really good there. I watched a couple of his games. And then he's obviously been playing for the Brumbies, who are by far the strongest Australian team in Super Rugby. So I think he's the standout candidate, definitely. Argentina, why can't they win a game of rugby at home? What is it with them? What's the matter with them?
And they had all the motivation in the world with it being Creevy's last game. The poor guy. He should have stopped after Wellington. That would have been the perfect.
He should have mic dropped. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure. And, you never want to kind of typecast the Argentinians, talk about their passion and their emotion and that kind of getting the better of them. But maybe that alongside the conditions and maybe also a little bit of expectation that they should walk over this Wallabies team. Maybe that was just what led them maybe not in the right mindset. I'm not sure. It was a ding-donger of a game. The lead changed a bunch of times. Like, they could have really won it.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Do you see it going the same next week? It's hard to say, isn't it? Because it was raining so much. If it's not raining next week, it might be a completely different game.
Exactly. Well, I think I read somewhere that's meant to be very warm wherever they're going next week. So, I don't know. I think if there were some really, if you think about the Wallabies, like really good things, their breakdown work was amazing. Valentini, Harry Wilson, Tizano, my goodness. I saw a stat earlier, you might be able to confirm. I don't think he's missed a tackle this whole in the rugby championship.
Across multiple games is tricky. Let's have a look. In this game, Tizano, 22 tackles without a miss and 2 turnovers, 1. That's good. That's good rugby.
Yeah. So I think real promise there.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, right. So let's get into some final topics now. So a couple of things that we wanted to chat about. Number 1, are you excited for WXV this season?
Yes, I'm hugely excited for WXV, but I'm struggling because the Red Roses Black Ferns Alliance Stadium test is before WXV, and I can't get my mind around
it's like a bit of a spoiler, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a spoiler, I feel. But then it's not guaranteed that we're going to be at the top of WXV1 by any means, because that Canadian team looking very good.
Right, I'm glad you mentioned it. I wanted to bring up Canada, but I didn't know whether you'd know about it. What has happened to this Canada team now? Because kind of came out of nowhere to win the Pac 4. When people assume because the Canada men's team is rubbish and the Canada women's team is good, people go like, oh, Rugby Canada must just be pouring resources into the women's team. No, that's not the case. I've been reading some things lately, and oh my goodness. So, what do you put it down to? Is it just because they got Sophie de Goody? Is that it?
Well, good point. I think, because I think there's quite a lot of sharing, isn't there, of players like between the 7s and the 15s program.
Exactly.
Like Olivia Apps played both. And who did I just see? I saw Fancy Bermuda has just got signed by Saracens.
What a great name, by the way.
I know.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, off point. Yeah, you can't really point to like, oh, they're paying them and actually treating them like professionals, because they're not. So I just think maybe it's a whole heap of heart and effort and belief that they've just kind of instilled out of nowhere. And they've got some, like you say, Sophie de Goody, we pointed Olivia Apps. Those are some really like amazing people that if I were playing, I'd probably follow pretty heartily. But yeah, I'd have to ask if you know Alice Soper. She probably has a really good take on why the Canadian women's team are doing as well as they are right now.
That's a good shout. I know of her. I might message her because I'm trying to do a thing about Canada rugby.
You should definitely message her. She would be great.
Yeah. So the Black Ferns then, like we said, lost out to Canada. They've got to go to the Allianz Stadium to play England, and Red Roses are as close to a perfect rugby team as there exists in the world at the moment. How are you feeling about the Black Ferns? Are you a bit like, what is happening to my beautiful New Zealand rugby teams? I thought we were supposed to be the chosen ones.
Yeah, it's a change. Look, the Black Ferns were always going to be in a different place when, what happens with professionalism, right? We saw it with men's rugby. Everyone's coming at it at different rates. Everyone's doing things in different ways. People like England doing it pretty damn well. And I don't think we've done it as well as England. And so you're going to start to see those gaps, right? When you're not able to live as a full-time professional athlete 52 weeks of the year. When other people are, there's obviously going to be impacts on that. So I think that's where you start to see the differences and why we see such a gap with England clearly at the top. But yeah, like you say, we did lose to Canada in Pac 4, which meant that Canada won Pac 4. And that was pretty disappointing. And then I do think we actually struggle a little bit for, I guess, competition, right? We had a hit out against the Wallaroos, and we dunched them 63-0, which felt good for about 10 seconds. And then you realize that we're playing England next, and that's our last hit out before then. So I think they've started playing a lot of games sort of against each other, like really physical sort of trial games for their squads and things. So, I mean, that's good, but probably, speaks to a little bit of the differences in the landscape across all the nations.
That feels like a bit of a trend with New Zealand rugby at the moment, men's and women's, is it's quite insular. Yep. It's quite, you're doing it for yourselves all over the place, and then the odd game against the Aussies, and it's like, if you look at the landscape of what everybody else is doing, a lot more diversity of ideas of opponents and things. So do you think that's starting to be, downfall's a strong word, but do you think it's starting to have a material effect in New Zealand rugby?
Yeah, it's a challenge. And I think, probably we're always going to have that sort of challenge because we geographically are challenged.
Yeah, exactly.
Far away and we're small. And, obviously you think of things, say, Geordie Barrett going to play over at Leinster next year. You go, okay, well, that's really cool. That's great for his development, what he can bring back to the system, which is definitely a change of thinking, I guess, to 10 years ago, where people come here to take things back. But we can't realistically have all of our players going to play over there, because what would that mean for Super Rugby? What would that mean for NPC, et cetera, because we're just so small and don't have the funding base. So, yeah, it is insular. I think you're so right. And that will have a material effect. And, it kind of feels like, to me, that we're like clinging on by the skin of our teeth, right? And through effort and care and like maybe a little bit of history and legacy carrying us through. But in terms of that's just not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. But that's why I'm not paid to make any decisions, because it seems like a very big task and very daunting task. And I'm sure there's plenty of brains going to try and make sure that we don't kind of get left behind by the rest of the world who's so connected and kind of have pretty well embedded systems at this point.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so you mentioned it briefly there, NPC. So two questions for NPC. First, what's with this whole Australian 10 invasion thing that's going on?
Good question. Because again, if you ask people about like the strength of the NPC, I don't know if many people would be like, yeah, it's a great training ground.
I find it difficult to follow just because of the number of teams. I think 14 teams is too many personally, but that's coming from a Wales fan, so take it with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, but it seems we've had just an influx of Australians coming over here in their sort of off season from Super to come and I guess continue playing rugby. And there are a number of really, really great players playing in the NPC New Zealand players, people who are on the fringe of the All Blacks. I think you said earlier there were a number of Samoa and Tongan players who weren't obviously in their teams for Pacific Nations Cup playing in the NPC. It obviously has a fun, that provincial element, regional kind of pride, which we maybe don't get as much in Super. So, Tane Edmonds here playing over for North Harbour. He's been getting a lot of love on Twitter, I think, for how he's been doing. But I don't know the history of like how often that has happened, but it seems like there's been a real influx this season.
And then NPC question number 2, every time someone talks about the Ranfield Shield, I nod knowingly and go, oh yeah, I don't really know what it is. So could you explain to me what it is?
So the Ranfield Shield is kind of like a lineal shield that exists in the NPC, but it can be played, I'm pretty sure, between, because there's 2 tiers, is it Premiership and Heartland? I'm actually going to stop because there's been too many changes since I've followed NPC like to the T. But yeah, it's a big shield. It was named after, I'm looking at the Wikipedia just so we know, the 5th Earl of Ranfurly, who was the governor of New Zealand. That was what it was. Interesting. But yeah, it's called the Log of Wood, kind of colloquially. Yeah. So there you win it. You are then obviously the holder, and each season I think you have to do 7 challenges across your season. All home games are challenges. I think you'll never challenge it on an away game. And that's kind of how it works. And it's definitely the most coveted piece of silverware, woodware in New Zealand rugby. It's been broken many times, famously last year by the Hawke's Bay Magpies after they won it off the Wellington Lions. I think it's been broken many times before that, but none was silly enough to broadcast that over social media. So bless them. Probably had all sorts of substances on it in its time. But yeah, it's a real relic of New Zealand rugby history for sure.
Lovely thought. Okay. And then last one, you mentioned that you were into your fashion before. So I want you to break down for me what you look for in a rugby jersey.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, as you can see, I'm here in my 2024 All Blacks playing jersey. I do like this one. I think I am a fan of a collar. When I think to other jerseys that I like, I do prefer a solid block color. Not too much fancy in the details. Maybe I'm a bit of a traditionalist in that way. I know you're a fan of the 2023 All Blacks jersey with its patterns.
Yeah, but I accept that I'm a minority. That's okay.
I think something solid in its color. I think not too much in the way of patterns. I'm not a fan of the England bus seat stripes situation happening at the moment. I think one that I do like a name on the back of the jersey. I do like a name on the back of the jersey. That's something else we could do better down here, I think. After they had it in the Six Nations, I was like, this is common sense. Why is no one doing that? I think I'm simple when it comes to a rugby jersey. Keeping it simple. Yeah.
I like a horizontal stripe. I don't mind a pattern on it, particularly if it's someone like Samoa. I don't have it. I'd have to move things around to get it out. Moana Pacifica's stash, I think, is some of the nicest stash going around. I really like it. I really like the patterns. I like you. I like a collar. On your Adidas All Blacks top there, are you shoulder stripes or no stripes?
Shoulder stripe.
It's got stripes, but are you like, should it or should it not?
No, I don't think it should, but that's just me. Do
you have a favorite manufacturer? Are you Nike, Adidas, Macron?
Adidas, for sure.
Yeah, I kind of like Nike. Nike is very cookie cutter. They just pick something that works and everybody gets that. Whereas Adidas is a bit more varied.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the gold standard is always, and maybe it's just because it was tied to the greatest team of all time, but the 2015 All Blacks Rugby World Cup kit, where it was just pretty solid black, except for it had this, you could barely see it, kind of, I guess, in the way that the pattern was done last year, but it was lines around the collar, which were meant to be representative of the 1905, like, originals All Blacks jerseys, and then black shorts, black socks, and most importantly, black boots for everyone. I think that is the best, but we're obviously very fortunate that we're a team playing in black. So we were talking about at the Olympics, there was every chance we could have been a blue and red team given our flag, and to have come out in the wash with black feels very, very lucky.
Yeah, definitely. My favorite thing about the 2015 kit is the black numbers that are glossy on the matte black jersey, so you can barely see them. I like it because that's like really leaning into the intimidation factor of being an all black, and I really like that. One of my favorite Wales kits is when we had an all red kit for a few years at the beginning of the 2010s. I really liked that. I'm not so into the white shorts. They did a new Wales kit, and the women have got red shorts.
I did see that.
I would prefer the men's kit if it had red shorts. Do you have a strong view on the red short debate, or not white short debate?
Well, yeah, I think no brainer for women, right? Like, to, like they said, to have like period anxiety and be in white shorts, like particularly if you're playing televised, like all sorts, it would just throw you off your game so much if you were worried about that. So it seems like a no brainer. And like you say, for consistency and brand, why not have the men in red too?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Okay, we have sadly reached the end of our time together talking about rugby this morning / evening. Just wanted to remind everybody before I wrap up that you can follow all our socials in the Linktree link in the description box down below. Also, sign up to our Substack where you get a long read article, or maybe even 2 every week. That's completely for free. Everything is for free. Only the membership costs you money, and that's voluntary. If you could help us grow, if you could help us share us around, we'd really appreciate that. Ella, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram and TikTok, Ella Ferguson 5 at both. It might be Ella Ferguson _5 on Instagram. Video content every day. That's where you can. I think I'm on Twitter too, but
you are, yeah. You've got 300 followers because it's not obviously you. Yeah. And you've got a podcast going, haven't you? Coast to Coast.
Oh shoot. Yes. Oh my goodness. So my friend Andy, who's Rugby Nors on TikTok, and I have been initially started in the summer series doing, I guess, limited kind of series YouTube podcast situation, cross hemisphere chatting rugby, but it's continued. So you can find that on Coast to Coast Rugby on YouTube. So that's us there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning / evening. It's been great fun. And thank you to everybody for listening / watching. If you have gotten this far, please subscribe, please share a link with a friend, and we will see you next time. Cheers, everybody.